Hi guys. Yeah, I apologize for you having to see me bent over as I realized I started the PowerPoint and then I realized, wait, I can't do that till I hit record. And once I hit record, then it's going to take us back to you need to share the screen. And oh, you guys understand all that. We've all been doing this since March. It is an unusual time. There's actually a Chinese curse. May you live in unusual times. And I would say we are qualifying. Yes, people ask me, pandemic, how are you handling it? How are you handling it? Well, here's the deal. I've had 2 aortic valve replacements, a double bypass, a heart attack, 3 stents. I can tell you what the barrel of my gun tastes like, and wait for it, I lost to a duck puppet on the old Star Search. So this is not the worst thing that's ever happened to me. It's bad, but it's not the worst. I am the mental health comedian, as you can probably see on the screen. I'm delighted to be with you. I mean, we're not like I'm not with you, but I am with you. I mean, if this has happened 20 years ago, we'd probably be doing this by conference call or everybody sitting around a table in the conference room and I'm on the speaker. So this is actually a step up from 2 decades ago. And I'm delighted the technology is available. I am the mental health comedian. You may be asking yourself, hold on, wait, stop. A comedian talking about mental health, depression, thoughts of suicide. How does that work? Well, I think a comedian's a good choice. I'll tell you why. Think about this. Who was the first comedian? It was a court jester. And what was the court jester's job? Court jester's job was to speak truth to power on behalf of the powerless with humor. And I believe I speak truth to the power of mental illness on behalf of those often powerless in its grip with humor. I believe where there's humor, there's hope. Where there's laughter, there's life, that nobody dies laughing. And depression and suicide run in my family. It's called generational depression and suicide. My grandmother died by suicide. My mother found her. My great aunt died by suicide. My mother and I found her. I was 4 years old. I screamed 4 days. I will not share that story with you. It is gruesome. I don't want to trigger anybody. Oh, and by the way, we're going to be covering some topics that can be triggering. It will elicit strong emotions. So if you have to leave, there is no shame in that. Yes, the first TEDx I did, I've done 5 of them. It's called a matter, M-A-T-T-E-R, of laugh, L-A-U-G-H, or death. Matter of life or death. And all 5 are on mental health, mental illness, one facet of it or another. And I myself live with mental illness, 2 of them actually, major depressive disorder and chronic suicidal ideation. And I can tell you what the barrel of my gun tastes like. Spoiler alert, I did not pull the trigger. It's okay to laugh. Most of my audiences, when I say that, laugh, although it's a nervous laugh, like, should we be laughing at this? A friend of mine was in the audience at one of the last live shows I did. He'd never heard me say that out loud, that I didn't pull the trigger. He came up after my presentation and said, hey man, how come you didn't pull the trigger? I go, hey man, can you try to sound a little less disappointed? If you want to know why I did not pull the trigger, because I had time, place, and method selected. It's in that first TEDx talk, a matter of laugh or death. So that I believe qualifies me to speak on mental health, depression, thoughts of suicide. And that's what we're going to do today. Suicide prevention, and we're going to talk a little bit about social distancing and staying sane. Actually, the full title of the keynote is Social Distancing and Staying Sane. Don't worry so much about your mentally ill friends, but I'll explain that later. Start the conversation. That's basically what I get paid to do. When I was rolling up to that first TEDx talk, I realized, because I did a couple of dress rehearsal versions here where I live for some community groups, I realized that though a large number of people die by suicide in the US, 47,000 on average, in an average year, one about every 11 minutes, hardly anybody talks about it. However, if you bring it up, pretty much everybody's got a story. I speak on suicide prevention, and my keynote generally goes like this: 45 minutes of a keynote, 15 of general Q&A, and then I say to the audience, look, if you have an individual question, something you don't want to ask in front of everybody else, like, hey, I'm crazy, can you help me? I'll hang out and I'll answer all the questions individually. And sometimes it's one person, sometimes it's 8 lined up. So again, starting the conversation gives people permission to give voice to their feelings and experiences surrounding depression, thoughts of suicide without recrimination. That's the important part. So my job is to start the conversation. One of my favorite Martin Luther King quotes, I will let you read that. I won't insult you. And well, Um, Perhaps someone doesn't, English is not a first language. So let me read it. Our lives begin to end the day we become silent about things that matter. Martin Luther King. Or perhaps you're sight impaired and couldn't see it. Because somebody pointed that out one time. Frank, it's great to have, say read that yourself, but what if what if their vision is impaired? What if English is a second language and they're not sure? But if you read it out loud, they'll get it. So that's why yeah, you can teach an old dog new tricks. And I'm an old dog, 63. And, given that I have mental health problems, 63, I'm delighted. People go, is it hard turning 63? Are you kidding me? Think of the, how else it could have turned out. Every year in the United States, 8 million people seriously contemplate suicide. 1.4 million attempted. 47,000 die by suicide. That does not count, by the way, the opioid deaths. And I think last year, 65, 66, 67,000. And we don't know how many of those were suicides, overdoses, intentional, and how many were simply overdoses. So the number, 47,000 last year. I have read several studies that speculate that this year there will be an additional 50, 60, maybe 70,000 of what they call deaths of despair. The majority of suicides in the US, 8 out of 10 are men, and men on average age 45, 54, generally Caucasian, but not all. And those also are classified as deaths of despair. Well, you got a guy who went to high school, got a high school diploma, went to work in a blue collar job in a factory, let's say it's a union gig, worked his way up to, union steward, floor supervisor, whatever, good middle class wages, and then boom, job's gone. Whether it's due to the pandemic or it's due because the job went someplace else. Now, a lot of people think all the jobs went overseas, China, Malaysia, Indonesia, Vietnam. Actually, only 15 to 17% of those jobs went overseas. The other 85, 87% were taken over by robotics and AI. And the big problem, is that men tend to tie their ego and their identity to their job. So if you've been doing the job for a couple of decades and all of a sudden you're cut loose at age 50, 51, 52, who am I? Which of course can lead to substance abuse disorders and eventually tragically suicide. So 47,000 last year, who knows how many this year. And I'm doing my best to stem the tide. My goal, somebody said, what's your goal overall? My goal is to end suicide. Somebody say to me, Frank, how come you're not speaking anymore? Well, people quit killing themselves. That's my goal. It's a little lofty. I agree. Probably won't happen in my lifetime, but if we keep working at it, maybe we can bring the numbers down significantly. Maybe today, meeting like this, maybe we saved a life, and that's a good day's work in my book. There, pandemic, 50 to 70,000 deaths of despair. The good news is you can make a difference. You can save a life, and you can do it by doing something as simple as what we're doing right here, and that is by starting the conversation. As I mentioned, people don't talk about it, don't speak about it out loud. It's sort of the last conversational taboo. But if you mention it, man, everybody has a story about themselves, about a loved one, a friend, a fraternity brother, or a college roommate. I got a message last night, Facebook message from a friend, a guy I met when I was working a cruise ship. He had a friend who he had gotten a note from that said he was done living and he wanted to die. So this gentleman messaged me and said, what do I do? And I said, well, if you know where he lives, his physical address, I would call the police in that town, if it's another town from where you are, and ask them simply to go by and do a welfare check. And so the police did. And the gentleman was in fact alive and was not actively suicidal. But, I always err on the side of caution. So that's somebody has to be unafraid to lead the freak parade. You guys know Big and Rich singing duo? That's my favorite Big and Rich song. Somebody's got to be unafraid to lead the freak parade. And that's my job. I get on stage, I let my freak flag fly. Rally my tribe. Yeah, because there's something about a guy, a man, going on stage, being vulnerable. When I tell some of the stories I tell, my personal experience, my lived experience, I get choked up. There's something about that just gives other men cover to come out and give voice to their feelings and experiences surrounding mental health, depression, thoughts of suicide. So that's my job. Yeah, I read Brene Brown's book on vulnerability, and about halfway through, I thought, oh my God, that's my superpower, vulnerability. There's another great quote in there, and I've said this many times, many different ways, but she put it best, I think, which is, and I'm quoting, I am so comfortable in my dark, I can sit comfortably with you in yours, end quote. Oh, gives me chills to say it. That's Comedy Boy. That's me. That's a smile I paste on every morning when I put my feet on the floor and walk through the world as if nothing is wrong. Because you hear people say, I never knew. He never made any indication, gave any indication that he was depressed and having thoughts of suicide. Yeah, we are good actors. We don't want to burden anyone with our troubles. I was working in the yard one day. My wife was leaving for work. I was terribly depressed. And I thought, I'll tell my wife, Wendy. And I thought, if I tell her, I'm not going to feel any better and she's going to feel worse. So I just kept it to myself. Now, if I'd been suicidal, I would have brought it up. But I was just, wretchedly depressed. And I have what's called major depressive disorder. If you're not familiar, I'm sure a lot of people who are listening are familiar, but for those who are not, for civilians, it's depression. It lasts anywhere from a couple of days to 2 weeks, and it recurs like a flat spot on a wheel. And with medication, and I'm on medication, I started taking medication at 60. I didn't have any philosophical problem with taking medication. I'm not angry at Big Pharma. I had some supplements, SAM-E, SAM-E. I had at Costco. It's good on mild depression. But I asked my doctor, hey man, got a little something for me and my depression? And he goes, well, why would I prescribe? I said, well, I have major depressive disorder and chronic suicidal ideation. And he said, okay, got the script out, and I've been taking Wellbutrin ever since. And I'm not pitching for Wellbutrin. It just worked for me. And by the way, if whatever the doctor prescribes doesn't work for you, I recommend take the cheek swab DNA test. They get a little saliva, and they try to match your DNA to whichever antidepressant, anti-anxiety, antipsychotic drug works best with your metabolism. It's not perfect yet, but it's a lot more precise than just throwing darts at a psychotropic dartboard. Also, ask your pharmacist, because sometimes the doctor only knows what the pharmaceutical rep told them. Ask the pharmacist what he or she thinks about that, and should you be taking it with the other medications you're on? Just a word of the wise. Again, err on the side of caution. But that's the face I show the world every day. Because again, I don't want to burden anybody. Cruising, I mentioned that earlier. One of the last engagements I did before the world shut down. And cruise ships shut down, and it looks like they're going to be parked until at least October 31st and maybe until February. It was this particular ship, and I was working what would have been a 115-day world cruise. Yeah, 150. I wasn't on for 115 days. I did a 10-day stint on a 115-day world cruise. And I don't know if you know much about cruising, but the longer the cruise, the older the passenger. So 115 days, we're talking old people and their parents. Every night, same thing for dessert, oxygen. I did a show in an 800-seat theater, packed. I called my wife from the port the next day and said, honey, you're not going to believe this. There was so much white hair in that theater, it looked like a Q-tip convention. On a previous cruise, prior to doing my first TEDx talk, and that's why I bring it up, I was in the Lido buffet one morning. We were at sea, which means the place was crowded. Couldn't find a seat. Look, there's a woman at a table for two, empty chair. I point, she nods, I sit. She looks up, she goes, hey, are you the comedian? I go, hey, did you enjoy the comedy show? She goes, I did. I said, then I'm the comedian. She starts laughing. She goes, what would you have said if I told you I hated the comedy show? Oh, they tell me I look a lot like him. She goes, and I get this question all the time, is comedy all you do? I said, no, I'm a public speaker. I just nailed my first TED Talk. She goes, I love the TED Talks. What's the topic? I believed I knew what was coming because I had this conversation many times. So I said depression and suicide and started to count down in my head. 3, 2, 1. She says, I tried to kill myself twice. We have just met. That's a rather personal thing to share with someone you have just sat down to breakfast with. She goes, first time in college, kind of half-hearted, not a big deal. Second time, far more serious, Frank. She said I had graduated college. I had graduated medical school. Had the knowledge, had the equipment, had the IV started in my ankle. Suicide cocktail one hand, syringe in the other, getting ready to load it up, and the phone rings. So she says she's debating with herself. Should she pick it up? She thought, I better, because it might be somebody who would worry if I didn't pick it up, come over and interrupt. Picks it up. It's her 13-year-old son. She says, I don't know if he had a premonition or just heard something in my voice, but he said, Mom, don't do anything. So I didn't. I didn't give up on the idea of suicide, she said, but I decided not to do it that day because I knew he would always feel guilty. Wasn't there something he could have done or said to stop my suicide? And suicide, by the way, is the most preventable cause of death on the planet. You do not have to be a clinician to stop a suicide. Anybody can do it. And we'll talk about how that works. I said, well, how old is he now? She says 21. I said, does he know his phone call literally saved your life? She goes, no. How do you start that conversation? And that became the overarching theme of A Matter of Life or Death, starting the conversation. Because you can make a difference, you can save a life, and you can do it oftentimes by doing something as simple as we're doing right here, and that is starting the conversation. This is my comedy side. What's wrong with this picture? If you wonder how comedians come up with jokes, that's how most of us do. We see something, hear something, and think to ourselves, what's wrong with this picture? Comedy is in the anomaly, the thing that doesn't fit, the thing that's the outlier, the thing that stands out. And it generally happens in real life, and that makes it funnier than fiction. It's difficult sometimes to get a laugh from fiction because people don't believe the premise. But if it's something that happened and they buy the premise, then you can get. I'll give you an example. And here's the deal: I could teach you to write stand-up comedy. I could teach you to perform stand-up comedy. What I cannot teach you to do is think or process the way I do. I have major depressive disorder and chronic suicidal ideation, which I believe is simply the flip side of my creativity, imagination, comic ability. Yeah, I think mental illness is not a singularity, but a duality, a combination of mental illness and mental ableness. I do believe. I think it's all rolled into. Think how many actors, athletes, politicians have mental illness and are, it's almost like they've got superpowers. So anyway, where were we? Got lost in that story. Hang on a second. Talking about superpowers. Let's see, where were we? On the ship. Oh, funny fiction. Talking about being a comic. I'm sorry. And see, several people are thinking right now, that's really cute how he pretended to lose his place. Oh yeah, I was pretending. Oh, I lost my place. Yeah, funnier than fiction. What's wrong with this picture? And you may be asking yourself, now wait a minute. He's just said again that he's a comedian and he's got 5 TEDx talks. How does a comedian get 5 TEDx talks? Well, first of all, you pick up something you're passionate about, and that is mental health, depression, thoughts of suicide. That's the number one thing they are looking for in the way of a TEDx talk. I coach TEDx. I've got a dozen or more clients, each of whom has done a TEDx or 2, except for one young woman, and it's killing me. We can't seem to find the curation team and the event that will just go gaga over her idea. I'm not giving up. It's out there, but yeah, everybody but the one student has gotten a TEDx. And Seth Godin, my favorite marketing guru, says all you need for TEDx is an idea. All you need for TEDx is an idea worth spreading, and all you need for an idea worth spreading is a tribe and a vacuum. My tribe is people who live with mental illness and for whom the option of suicide is always on the menu as a solution for problems large and small. And when I say small, a couple of years ago, my car broke down. I had 3 thoughts unbidden: get it fixed, buy a new one, or I could just kill myself. That's chronic suicidal ideation. And every time I have spoken, except once, at least one person in the audience, sometimes more, have chronic suicidal ideation and have no idea that it has a name. Yeah, and I did a college presentation, a college suicide prevention presentation. A young woman came up afterwards. She said, Frank, I want to thank you for your keynote. I said, you're welcome. She said, but I got to tell you, it made me weep. Why did it make you weep? She said, because the story about, I didn't tell you the car story. I'm sorry, let me back up a bit. Yeah, I did. Get it fixed, buy a new one, just kill myself. I'm sorry, I did tell you the car story. Occasionally a comedian will tag a story that they haven't actually covered. I've had that happen to me. Anyway, we talked about it. Get it fixed, buy a new one, or I could just kill myself. She says, the car story? Get it fixed, buy a new one, just kill yourself. She goes, I've been having those thoughts all my life. She said, I did not know that had a name. She said, I just thought I was some kind of freak because of the way my brain worked. And she said, when you said that out loud, I realized for the first time in my life that I am in fact not alone, and I wept. That's my why. That's why I do what I do. Now, fast forward a couple of months, I'm working, doing a suicide prevention speech at University of Montana Billings. It's January, I think. So it's cold, and I'm standing on the curb waiting for the young man to come with his pickup truck to take me back to the hotel. It's beginning to snow, it's dusk, and I can hear a river in the distance. And I'm thinking about all the people who've come up to me after these presentations, and they didn't know that there was such a thing as chronic suicidal ideation. They didn't know it had a name. They thought they were just some kind of freak, and because of the way they thought. And perhaps I've steered them far enough off the path of suicide by letting them know that they are not alone, that they'll live a normal life. And it hit me like a ton of bricks. Oh, dear God. I am like George Bailey in It's a Wonderful Life. I have been shown, perhaps by an angel that kept me from pulling the trigger, what these people's lives would be like if I were not there to speak and let them know they are in fact not alone. So my second thought was, oh, great, now I can't kill myself. Because why? Because I would take all those people with me, because they would have never had the opportunity to hear me speak and let them know, in fact, they are not alone. So I'm stuck, which is not a bad thing. Empathy, very difficult to come by. Brene Brown says, sympathy is I feel sorry for you, and empathy, I feel sorry with you. It's very difficult for neurotypical, neuronormal people to be empathetic because they don't have a lot of context. I did a college, Lynchburg College. A young woman came up after my presentation. She said, can I give you a hug? Okay, this is at the height of the Me Too movement. I'm thinking everybody in the room's got an iPhone or a smartphone with a video camera, and I'm going to be on the front page of the Lynchburg, Virginia paper tomorrow, hugging the speaker gropes co-ed or something. So I gave her a very brotherly hug. I pushed my pelvis back as far as I could. And when we got done with the hug, I said, are you a hugger? She goes, no, not a hugger. Why the hug? She goes, well, I've been in therapy for 2 years. And the woman that's working with me, she is good. I mean, she's got the education. She's got she's got all the book learning, as we used to say down south, but no context. She goes, I'm sitting in the back of the room, 15 minutes into your little keynote. I'm thinking, this guy's inside my head. She goes, you've done more for me in 45 minutes than that woman's done for me in 2 years. And by the way, that's the power of peer counseling. That's where it lies. There's an old story about a guy who falls down a well, and the handholds are too high, so he can't crawl out, can't to get himself out. And a friend comes by, looks down the well, and says, "Oh man, that's awful. I wish I could help you." And then a family member comes by, same story, looks down, "Yeah, I wish I could help you, but And then a stranger comes by, looks down, sees the gentleman at the bottom of the well, crawls over the lip of the well, drops down to the floor of the well. And the guy in the well goes, "What are you doing?" Goes, I'm here to help you." "Help me? Now you're stuck down here." "Yes, that's true. But I've been here before. I know my way out." That's the power of peer counseling. And here's something that neuronormal people, neurotypical people, I think don't understand about mental illness. There's a Greek character named Sisyphus. And I don't know if you recall from your learning about Greek mythology, but he gave fire to man, and darn glad he did. I love barbecue. And the other gods punished him by forcing him to roll the rock up a hill every day with the idea that someday he'd get it over the top, it would roll down the other side, and he could quit. But every time he got it near the top, it rolled back down to the bottom. Having a mental illness is like that. Every morning you wake up, there's a rock in the hill. Some days the rock is small, the hill's not so steep. Some days the rock is a boulder and the hill's Kilimanjaro. But without fail, every day, there's a rock in the hill. And it's your job to move it. And the day comes for a lot of us when we wake up. It's happened to me. And I simply could not move the rock. My job speaking is to make sure that anybody who hears the sound of my voice, when they wake up, will be able to move the rock. That's my why. Now, that's my depression. because every suit like that, do you remember these? Came with a pair of these lead-filled boots. That's what depression feels like to me. It's like somebody's turned up the force of gravity and turned down the contrast in the world. First day, I kind of slide down into it. Second day, I bottom out. Third day, I begin to come up the other side. But it's difficult some days simply to put one foot in front of the other. It just feels like you're wearing lead boots. There is help available. Suicide Prevention Lifeline, one in Canada, and the text line, of course. Text help or connect 741-741. And I think I've got another slide coming up about mental health first aid, which I believe you guys teach. And anyway, some other resources. Socially distancing and staying sane. Social distancing saves lives, but you know, it can be difficult. I believe that as a mentally ill person who's relatively high functioning, that I have a skill set that is actually is particularly A, helps me through the pandemic, and B, transferable. I can't tell you how many podcasts, radio interviews, newspaper interviews I've done where I'm basically teaching neurotypical people how to do what mentally ill people do every day to be able to get out of bed, put your feet on the floor in the morning, and go to work. These are the action items. It's an uncertain world, but you know what? People with mental illness pretty much wake up in an uncertain world every day. I mean, we've seen this before. Every morning when the sun rises, it's an uncertain day for us. So most of us, relatively used to it. I believe that to survive it, you need a self-care plan. Mine's diet, exercise, good night's sleep, meditation, medication, and a schedule. Very important to have a schedule. They asked an astronaut who'd been in a space station for a year, how do you survive that kind of social isolation? He said one word: schedule. Go to bed at the same time, get up at the same time, have your meal at the same time, maybe roughly the same time. Plan your fun time, plan your exercise, have a schedule. Because, you know, before you at work, perhaps, you know, you show up at 8, you leave at 5 when the whistle blows, everything very structured, and now all of a sudden, you're loose in gamification. Some days I can't get myself out of bed in the morning. So it's called gamification. I make a list of 6 things, my to-do list, 6 things. And the game is, as soon as I scratch off number 6, I can go back to bed, pull the covers over my head, and binge watch Daredevil on Netflix. I don't care if it's 3 in the afternoon, broad daylight. That's the game. It's called gamification. Something that people with mental illness often use to be able to, because there are days when, you know, you just don't want or can't get out of bed, not physically, mentally. There you go. I'm a certified mental health first aider. I highly recommend that. It is an amazing course, Mental Health 101, but I'm preaching to the choir here, I have a feeling. NAMI, New Jersey, that was the last speech I did, was a military base, McGuire Joint Base in New Jersey. And this is something, workplacesuicideprevention.com, that my co-author on a series of books on men's mental health called Guts, Grit, and the Grind, a mental mechanics manual. We have 4 volumes. First 2 volumes are out, kind of chicken soup for the tortured man's soul, 12 stories, 12 different problems guys have and how they're coping. Yeah, it's called Guts, Grit, and the Grind, a mental mechanics manual. Sally Spencer Thomas, Dr. Sally Spencer Thomas, is one of the co-authors of the Workplace Suicide Prevention Take the Pledge campaign for businesses, for leadership at businesses. And there's Guts, Grit, and the Grind, yeah, commercial for our book. By the way, if you go to my website, thementalhealthcomedian.com, and put an email address in, I narrate the books. So the first book is already done, and the MP3, if you put your email address in there, you can download the MP3 unabridged audiobook for free. So, and the second book's out. I'm in the process of recording the second book or narrating the second book. And I've studied QPR. Now, let's talk about the signs and symptoms of depression, thoughts of suicide, because you always hear people say, I got no indication, you made no indication. That's not true. We train German Shepherds. People say, the dog bit me, never gave me any hint they were going to bite me. Yes, they did. They were throwing hints left and right. You just didn't know what you're looking at. If a dog is going to bite you, first thing you do is freeze. Then their eyes go flat. Their ears go back, and the hackles, last thing, raise. So you have 4 hints there. The dog's just basically saying, back up, I don't want to bite you. Depression, thoughts of suicide, there are signs and symptoms. Well, what are the signs of depression? Here's just a couple of the most prominent ones, I guess. Has trouble getting out of bed in the morning, rallies in the afternoon. Doesn't take near as much joy in social activities. Oh, there's my, hang on. That doesn't take near as much, hang on, that's my clock telling me I've gone to 30 minutes. I'll try to wrap this up. Don't take as much joy in social activities as they did before. And the other prominent one is let their personal hygiene go. You know, this is Zoom casual. I don't normally wear a hat, but it looks better on the Zoom. And I was not wearing pants. I am wearing pants, but they're like old jeans because you can't see them, and tennis shoes. That's Zoom casual. Then there's, you know, I'm letting my personal hygiene go casual. Hair's a little dirty, clothes aren't quite so clean because they just can't seem to drag themselves out of bed to the bathroom to shave and shower and run a load of wash. So that's something to look out for in terms of depression. Now, the question comes up, what do you say to somebody you believe is depressed? Here's what you don't say. Pull yourself up by your bootstraps, turn that frown upside down. Have you tried fish oil? Trust me. Here's what you do say. I'm here for you, and I mean, I know you're not crazy, lazy, or self-absorbed. I know that depression is a mental illness. The good news is with time and treatment, things will get better. I'll take the time, help you get the treatment. And here's the question that most everybody, including me, I have difficulty asking. Are you having thoughts of suicide? Just like that. And if you can't ask that question, you find somebody who can. Now, let's say they're not forthcoming that they are having thoughts of suicide. How do you spot someone who's having thoughts of suicide? What are the signs and symptoms? Well, talking about death and dying, Googling death and dying appears as a theme in their artwork, music, writing. They're giving their personal affairs in order, especially if they're giving away prized possessions to people who they want to make sure they go to the people they want them to go to, you know, after they're gone. And here's one that's counterintuitive, extremely dangerous. They've been depressed forever, and then for no apparent reason, they're happy. And you're happy because they're happy. Dangerous, because they may be happy because they've chosen time, place, and method, and they know the pain is finite. That's something I think neurotypical, neuronormal people don't understand about suicidal thoughts. People say to me, why did so-and-so want to kill themselves? Well, I don't think, chances are they did not want to kill themselves. They simply wanted to end the pain. I simply wanted to end the pain. So let's say they are forthcoming and they say they are having thoughts of suicide. Do you have a plan? If you have a plan, what is your plan? If the plan is detailed, you guys know, get them on the phone or texting to the suicide prevention lifelines. Now, I believe if they say they are suicidal, having suicidal thoughts, and the plan is not particularly well formed, the next question I would ask is, well, tell me this, are you going to kill yourself? And if they say no, and I think this is the most important question, tell me why not. Because if you ask me, I would say, because I'm like George Bailey and It's a Wonderful Life. If I kill myself, I will take a great number of people with me because they never would have had a chance to hear me speak and let them know they're not, in fact, alone. So when you call the police, you guys know this. If they're in immediate danger to themselves or others, no choice but to call the police. Of course, that's going to buy them probably a 3-day stay in an all expense paid mental health gated community with no shoestrings or belt, and they'll probably unfringe on Facebook, but they'll still be alive. Let me leave you with one funny story. I know I'm over time, but I think when you hear it, you'll be glad I told you. Sometimes as a mentally ill person, I want to take my game face off, and if somebody asks me how I'm doing, I tell them. So I'm in Sacramento, I crawl into the Uber, nice young man, with eyes lock in the mirror, and he asked me, and I've done 2 3-hour suicide prevention CE, hang on, you're gonna have to wait. Sorry, doorbell, I'm not expecting anybody. He asked me, how you doing? I said, I'm depressed and suicidal, how about you? And he says, what am I supposed to say to that? And I said, do you really want to know? And he said, yes. I said, you're supposed to ask if I have a plan. So he goes, do you have a plan? And a long pause. Does it involve Uber? Brilliant. Anyway, wish I could have been with you in person, but I think even at a distance, thanks to Zoom, it's a good chance we may have saved a life, and that's a good day's work. Thanks very much for having me.